For all of human history we have looked up at the night sky, we saw a silver disk hanging in the darkness. It was a lantern in the night, a source of mystery and of wonder, the moon. It pulled at our oceans, it pulled at our imaginations. We told stories about it, we wrote poems about it. We dreamed of reaching out and touching its silent, dusty face, shared by all people in all places throughout all of time. A universal desire to journey beyond the familiar blue sky. This ancient dream suddenly became a race, a competition between two nations, the United States, the Soviet Union. This was the Cold War, a time of tension, a contest of ideas and of power. The sky was no longer just a place for dreams. It became a new frontier. Who would get there first? The Apollo program was born from a bold promise. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy stood before the United States Congress. He delivered a speech that would change the course of history. He saw the early successes of the Soviet space program. He understood the challenge that America faced. So he made a declaration that seemed almost impossible. He proposed that America should commit itself to landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. And he set a deadline, before the end of the decade. This was not just a suggestion, it was a national objective. This promise was a monumental undertaking. At the time Kennedy spoke, the United States had only 15 minutes of human spaceflight experience. We had not yet even figured out how to make two spacecraft meet in orbit. The technology needed to go to the moon simply did not exist. The computers, the rockets, the spacesuits, the navigation systems, all of it had to be invented. It was like promising to build a skyscraper when you had only ever built a small house, and you didn't even have the tools to begin. The name for this grand project was Apollo. In ancient Greek mythology, Apollo was the god of the sun, of archery, and of prophecy. He was a symbol of light and knowledge. It was a fitting name for a mission that would travel through the darkness of space. Before we could walk on the moon, we first had to learn how to fly in space. The Apollo program was a series of missions, each one a stepping stone to the next. Early missions tested the spacecraft in Earth's orbit. Apollo 7, Apollo 8, it flew all the way to the moon. It orbited 10 times. On Christmas Eve of 1968, for the first time human eyes saw the Earth rise over the lunar horizon. It was a beautiful and humbling sight. Apollo 9 tested the lunar module, the small craft that would land on the moon. Apollo 10 was a full dress rehearsal. It flew down to just 9 miles above the lunar surface, then returned to the command module. Then came the big one, Apollo 11. On a hot summer day, July 16, 1969, a giant Saturn V stood ready on the launch pad. Inside were 3 men, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins. The world held its breath as the countdown reached 0. The rocket lifted off with a tremendous roar and pillar of fire. The Saturn V climbed into the sky. For 4 days they traveled through the black void of space, a tiny capsule hurtling toward the moon. Their destination, the Sea of Tranquility. Michael Collins orbited alone in Columbia. Armstrong and Aldrin entered the Eagle. They began their descent. Who were the men chosen for these incredible journeys? The Apollo astronauts were not ordinary people. They were selected from the best of the best. Most were military test pilots, used to flying high-performance jets, facing danger with calm professionalism. They had to be in peak physical condition. They also had to be brilliant engineers and scientists. They needed to understand every switch, every dial, every system. Their lives and the mission depended on knowledge and quick thinking. Life as an astronaut was not glamorous. Years of intense, repetitive training. Countless hours in simulators, practicing every moment of the mission from launch to landing, prepared for every possible emergency. What if a thruster failed? What if the computer crashed? What if there was a fire? Answers memorized, ready to react in an instant. Practiced walking in bulky spacesuits. Studied geology to know what rocks to look for. Difficult and demanding work for a flight of only a few days. Personalities were carefully considered, confined in a space no bigger than a small car with 2 others for over a week. They needed to be patient, focused, cooperative, to work together under extreme stress without friction. The crew of Apollo 11 was a perfect example. Getting to the moon required the most powerful machine ever built. This was the Saturn V rocket. It was a true giant, standing taller than a 36-story building. It was made of millions of individual parts, and every single one had to work perfectly. On the launch pad it weighed over 6 million pounds, most of which was fuel. The first stage engines were so powerful that the sound they created could physically shake buildings miles away. The Saturn V was the engine of the Apollo program. It was the only rocket with enough power to escape Earth's gravity and send humans on a path to the moon. The spacecraft itself was a marvel of engineering, composed of three main parts. The command module, nicknamed Columbia for Apollo 11, was the astronauts' main living quarters and the command center for the mission. It was the only part of the spacecraft that would return to Earth, splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. The service module was attached to the command module. It contained the main engine, oxygen, water, and power supplies. It was the workhorse that would get the astronauts to the moon and back. These two parts together were called the Command Service Module, or CSM. Then there was the most unique vehicle of all, the Lunar Module, or LM. Nicknamed Eagle for Apollo 11, this was the first true spacecraft. It was designed to fly only in the vacuum of space where there is no air. This is why it looks so strange and fragile, with its thin, foil-covered walls and gangly legs. Its job was to separate from the CSM, ferry two astronauts down, and then launch them back up to rejoin the command module in orbit. What did the astronauts actually do once they arrived on the moon? They were not just tourists. They were scientists and explorers on a mission. Their time on the lunar surface was carefully planned, with every single minute dedicated to important tasks. The first thing they did was set up the American flag, which became a powerful symbol of the nation's achievement. But their primary goal was science. They needed to collect as much information as possible about the moon. This alien world held clues to the history of our solar system, and they were there to uncover them. A major part of their work was setting up experiments. They deployed a package of scientific instruments called the Apollo Lunar Surface Experiments Package, or ALSEP. This was basically a mini science station that was left behind on the moon. It had instruments to measure moonquakes, the solar wind, the lunar heat flow. These experiments continued to send valuable data back to Earth for years after the astronauts had left. They were our first robotic eyes and ears, helping us understand the moon's environment long after the footprints had been made. One of the most important jobs was to be geologists. The astronauts collected rocks and soil samples. The Apollo program did not end with Apollo 11. There were 5 more successful moon landings, each mission built on the one before it. Apollo 12 landed with pinpoint precision. Apollo 12 landed next to an old robotic probe. Apollo 14 explored the Framaro Highlands. Apollo 15, a true scientific expedition with the lunar rover. Apollo 16, a true scientific expedition with the lunar rover. Apollo 17, a true scientific expedition with the lunar rover. The last man to walk on the moon was Eugene Cernan on Apollo 17 in December 1972. His final words from the surface were a promise. "We leave as we came, and God willing as we shall return, with peace and hope for all mankind." The legacy of Apollo is immense. First, scientific impact. Lunar samples reshaped our understanding of the moon and solar system formation. The moon had a dynamic volcanic past. Scientists confirmed its age and composition. ALSEP data gave our first long-term look at the lunar environment. It was a golden age of planetary science. Second, technological impact. Apollo spurred breakthroughs in computing. Apollo drove advances in materials science. Apollo accelerated communications technology. The microchip grew from the need for small, lightweight spacecraft computers. The world we live in today was shaped by the footsteps left on the moon. The Apollo mission sparked a global passion for science and technology. An entire generation of young people were inspired to become scientists, engineers, doctors, innovators. They saw what was possible when people dared to dream big. This inspiration led to countless new discoveries and technologies that define modern life. The computer revolution, the internet, satellite communications, the seeds of these technologies were watered by the ambition of the Apollo program. It taught us that no problem was too big to solve. The program also demonstrated the power of peaceful international cooperation. While the space race began as a competition, it ended in a handshake. It paved the way for the International Space Station. Why do we explore? Why do we climb the highest mountains? Why do we cross the widest oceans? Why did we go to the moon? It is because there is a fundamental part of the human spirit that is curious. We have a deep need to know what is over the next hill, beyond the horizon. It is this same spirit that drove the first explorers to sail across unknown seas. It is the spirit that drives scientists to look deeper into the atom. The Apollo program was the ultimate expression of this human impulse. It was our curiosity taking us on the greatest adventure in history. They were a message we sent to ourselves. They taught us that the impossible is not truly impossible. it is just a problem that we have not solved yet. When we face great challenges today, climate change, disease, poverty, we can look back at Apollo for inspiration. We can remember that we are the same species that figured out how to fly to the moon. We have the ability to come together, to focus our collective genius, and to achieve extraordinary things.